February 10, 1983, 11:30 a.m. Canarsie, Brooklyn, New York. The trunk of a black Cadillac Eldorado sat half-open in the parking lot of the Verna Boat Club. Inside, what remained of Roy Albert DeMeo lay wrapped in plastic sheeting, his body showing signs of torture that made even hardened NYPD detectives look away. 7 bullets to the head, hands bound, multiple stab wounds. But here's what made this discovery different from typical mob executions. Roy DeMeo wasn't just another victim of organized crime violence. He was the man who had perfected it. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. For 15 years, DeMeo had operated the most efficient killing machine in Gambino family history. His crew didn't just murder people, they made them disappear completely. No bodies, no evidence, no loose ends. They turned an auto parts shop in Brooklyn into America's most prolific murder factory. Conservative estimates put their victim count at over 200 people. And they did it all while making millions for the Gambino crime family through car theft, drug trafficking, and loan sharking. But Roy DeMeo's story isn't just about violence. It's about how organized crime became industrialized in the 1970s and 80s. How a kid from Flatlands, Brooklyn built a criminal operation so successful that it generated $20 million annually for the mob. How he created methods of disposal so effective that most of his victims were never found. And how his own success eventually made him too dangerous for his own crime family to keep alive. This is the story of the Butcher of Brooklyn. How Roy DeMeo transformed murder from a crude instrument of mob justice into a precise business operation. How he recruited a crew of killers who worked with the efficiency of a legitimate corporation. And how the very methods that made him valuable to the Gambino family ultimately sealed his fate. But here's what makes this different from every other mob story you've heard. Roy DeMeo wasn't killed because he betrayed the family or because he got greedy. He was eliminated because he had become too good at what he did. His operation had grown so large, so visible, and so successful that it threatened to bring down the entire Gambino crime family. When you're the best at murder in an organization built on murder, you eventually become the biggest target. Let's go back to where it started. Not in some dramatic mob war, but in a Flatlands auto repair shop where a 25-year-old Roy DeMeo learned that violence, properly organized, could be the most profitable business in New York City. Roy Albert DeMeo was born May 4, 1940, in Flatlands, Brooklyn, to working-class Italian-American parents. His father was a butcher, a detail that would prove grimly prophetic. His mother kept house and tried to keep Roy out of trouble. She failed. By age 16, Roy was already running with older kids involved in car theft and burglary. But Roy was different from typical street criminals in one crucial way. He had a mind for business. While other young hoods were pulling random scores, Roy was studying how legitimate businesses operated. He watched how successful auto repair shops managed inventory, how they maintained customer relationships, how they expanded operations. He applied these lessons to criminal enterprises. By 20, he wasn't just stealing cars. He was running a systematic car theft operation that supplied vehicles to a network of buyers across New York and New Jersey. The key to Roy's early success was location. He operated out of the Gemini Lounge, a bar he purchased at 4021 Flatlands Avenue in Brooklyn. From the outside, it looked like a typical neighborhood bar, dark windows, neon beer signs, local clientele. Inside, Roy had created something unprecedented, a headquarters for organized crime that functioned like a legitimate business office. The Gemini Lounge had a front room where neighborhood people could drink and play pool. But the back room was where Roy conducted business. He had filing cabinets, accounting ledgers, and a systematic approach to tracking criminal operations. He knew which cars were easiest to steal, which had the highest resale value, which could be chopped for parts most profitably. He maintained relationships with corrupt DMV employees who provided clean titles. He had a network of legitimate and illegitimate auto dealers who would purchase stolen vehicles with minimal questions. By 1975, Roy's car theft operation was generating over $1 million annually. But Roy understood something that many criminals miss. Success in illegal enterprises attracts attention from both law enforcement and organized crime. If you're making serious money outside the traditional mob structure, you eventually have to choose. Join them or risk being shut down by them. Roy chose to join. He reached out to Anthony Nino Gaggi, a captain in the Gambino crime family who controlled criminal operations in Canarsie and East Flatlands. Gaggi was old-school Mafia, a made man with connections throughout the family hierarchy. He was also smart enough to recognize that Roy's operation was too valuable to destroy and too successful to ignore. The partnership was perfect. Gaggi provided protection through the Gambino family. Roy provided profits through his systematic approach to car theft. More importantly, Roy began providing something else: reliable violence. When Gaggi needed problems eliminated, Roy handled them. When the family needed competitors removed, Roy took care of it. When witnesses needed to disappear, Roy made it happen. But Roy's approach to murder was different from traditional mob hits. Most Mafia killings in the 1970s were quick, brutal, and designed to send messages. A bullet to the head, a body left in a public place, a clear warning to anyone thinking about crossing the family. Roy's method was more sophisticated. He didn't want to send messages. He wanted problems to simply cease to exist. The basement of the Gemini Lounge became Roy's workshop. He had studied anatomy, not formally, but through practice. He knew how to dismember bodies efficiently, how to package remains for disposal, how to clean crime scenes so thoroughly that forensic investigators found nothing. His crew called the process the Gemini Method. Here's how it worked, and this is where the story becomes genuinely disturbing. Victims would be lured to the Gemini Lounge under various pretexts: business meetings, social gatherings, parties. Once inside, they would be quickly subdued and taken to the basement. Roy had soundproofed the space. Neighbors never heard anything. The killing itself was systematic. A bullet to the head to ensure death, but not immediately. Roy wanted victims alive for questioning if information was needed. The dismemberment process was methodical. Roy had learned that certain cuts prevented blood loss. Others facilitated organ removal. Others made packaging easier. Bodies were completely disassembled and wrapped in plastic sheeting and garbage bags. The disposal was equally systematic. Different body parts went to different locations. Some were taken to landfills in New Jersey. Others were dumped in various waterways around New York. Some were fed to dogs at a farm Roy maintained in upstate New York. The goal was complete elimination. No body meant no murder case. No evidence meant no prosecution. Between 1975 and 1982, Roy DeMeo's crew operated like a murder corporation. They had regular employees: Chris Rosenberg, Joey Testa, Anthony Center, Joseph Mad Dog Sullivan, Henry Borelli, and others. Each had specific roles. Some specialized in luring victims. Others handled the killings. Others managed disposal. Roy oversaw everything with the attention to detail of a Fortune 500 CEO. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. They kept records, not written records. Roy wasn't stupid, but systematic mental accounting of operations, profits, and problems. They had procedures for everything: how to approach potential victims, how to clean the basement after each killing, how to maintain alibis, how to distribute profits from associated criminal enterprises. The crew's effectiveness was unprecedented. Most of their victims were never found. Families never knew what happened to missing relatives. Police had no bodies, no crime scenes, no evidence to investigate. Missing person cases went cold immediately because there was nothing to investigate. But the operation wasn't just about murder. The Gemini Lounge crew was generating massive profits for the Gambino family through multiple enterprises. Car theft remained the core business, but they expanded into drug trafficking, loan sharking, labor racketeering, and pornography distribution. Roy understood that successful criminal enterprises needed to diversify revenue streams. The drug operation alone was generating $5 million annually by 1980. Roy's crew controlled distribution networks throughout Brooklyn and Queens. They used violence to eliminate competition, but they used business methods to maintain market share. They offered better products, more reliable service, and systematic expansion into new territories. The loan sharking operation was equally profitable. Roy lent money at rates that doubled every month. When borrowers couldn't pay, they didn't just get beaten up. They disappeared. Word spread quickly through Brooklyn's business community that debts to Roy DeMeo got paid or the borrower ceased to exist. Collection rates approached 100%. By 1981, Roy's various operations were generating an estimated $20 million annually for the Gambino family. Roy kept approximately 25% of profits. Nino Gaggi received 25%, and the remaining 50% went up the chain to family leadership. Paul Castellano, who had become Gambino boss after Carlo Gambino's death in 1976, was directly benefiting from Roy's success. But success created problems. The FBI had noticed that people connected to certain Brooklyn neighborhoods were disappearing at unusual rates. Missing person reports were piling up. All the cases seemed to have connections to the same general area of Flatlands and Canarsie. More importantly, the missing people were all connected to criminal activities that competed with Gambino family operations. Federal investigators began surveillance of the Gemini Lounge in 1981. They photographed people entering and leaving. They documented vehicles. They tracked patterns. They noticed that certain people went into the Gemini Lounge and were never seen again. The surveillance also captured something else: the extraordinary success of Roy's legitimate-seeming operations. The Gemini Lounge was consistently busy. Roy drove expensive cars. His crew members lived lavishly. Money was flowing in amounts that suggested major criminal enterprises. Roy made his first serious mistake in late 1981. Chris Rosenberg, one of his most trusted crew members, was generating too much attention. Rosenberg was young, flashy, and reckless. He drove Ferraris, wore expensive jewelry, and dated high-profile women. More problematically, he was selling drugs to college students in affluent neighborhoods, bringing middle-class families into contact with Roy's operation. When the son of a politically connected Long Island family died from an overdose of drugs sold by Rosenberg, it became a problem that reached beyond Brooklyn Street crime. The victim's father was a prosecutor. The case generated media attention. The FBI investigation intensified. Roy realized that Rosenberg had to go. But Rosenberg was like a son to Roy. He had been with the crew for 6 years. He knew everything about the operation. He knew about the murders, the disposal methods, the financial enterprises. Killing Rosenberg meant killing someone who could destroy Roy if he ever cooperated with law enforcement. On May 11, 1982, Roy lured Rosenberg to the Gemini Lounge. He told Rosenberg they were meeting to discuss expanding the drug operation. When Rosenberg arrived, Roy shot him in the head. It was the most personally difficult killing of Roy's career, but it was also the beginning of the end. Rosenberg's disappearance triggered a federal investigation specifically focused on the Gemini Lounge crew. The FBI knew Rosenberg had been working with Roy. They knew he had disappeared after meeting with Roy. They began building a case that connected Roy's crew to multiple disappearances, multiple criminal enterprises, and systematic murder. More dangerously for Roy, Paul Castellano was becoming concerned about the attention the Gemini Lounge was generating. Castellano was old-school mafia. He preferred criminal operations that stayed below law enforcement radar. Roy's operation was becoming too visible, too successful, and too connected to ongoing federal investigations. In early 1983, Castellano made a decision. The Gemini Lounge operation had to be shut down. Roy DeMeo had become too dangerous to keep alive. The crew that had generated millions for the family was now a liability that threatened the entire organization. On January 10, 1983, Roy received a call. Paul Castellano wanted to meet with him to discuss expanding his territories and increasing his responsibilities within the family. Roy knew it might be a trap, but he also knew that refusing to meet with the boss was equivalent to signing his own death warrant. Roy never made it to the meeting. On his way to see Castellano, he was intercepted by Gambino family members. The details of what happened next were never fully established, but the results were documented when his body was discovered a month later in the trunk of his Cadillac. The torture marks on Roy's body told a story. He had been questioned extensively before being killed. The family wanted to know everything about his operations, his profits, his methods, and most importantly, whether he had been cooperating with law enforcement. The 7 bullets to his head suggested they had gotten their answers. Roy's murder solved Castellano's immediate problem, but created a larger one. With Roy dead, the Gemini Lounge operation collapsed. The crew members scattered. Some were eventually arrested and prosecuted. Others disappeared. The multi-million-dollar revenue stream disappeared overnight. More problematically, Roy's death became the centerpiece of a major federal investigation. The FBI used his murder as evidence of a continuing criminal enterprise. They prosecuted surviving crew members under RICO statutes. They used testimony from crew members who flipped to build cases against Gambino family leadership. In 1988, 5 years after Roy's death, Anthony Gaggi was convicted of multiple murders connected to the Gemini Lounge operation. Joey Testa and Anthony Center, two of Roy's closest associates, were convicted of 25 murders and sentenced to life in prison. Henry Borelli received a 25-year sentence. Other crew members received sentences ranging from 10 to 30 years. But the biggest consequence was what Roy's operation revealed about the changing nature of organized crime. The Gemini Lounge wasn't just a murder factory. It was a systematic business operation that applied corporate methods to criminal enterprises. Roy had created something that law enforcement had never seen before: organized crime that was genuinely organized. Federal prosecutors used the Gemini Lounge case to develop new strategies for attacking organized crime. They focused on financial evidence, business records, and systematic patterns rather than just individual crimes. They used RICO statutes to prosecute entire organizations rather than individual criminals. The case also revealed the vulnerability of traditional mob structures in an era of electronic surveillance and federal persistence. Roy's operation had been successful for 8 years, but once law enforcement focused on it, the entire enterprise collapsed within months. Today, the Gemini Lounge is gone. The building was demolished in the 1990s. A small residential development sits where Roy DeMeo's murder factory once operated. But the case remains a teaching tool for federal agents and a cautionary tale about the limits of criminal success. Roy DeMeo built the most efficient killing operation in American organized crime history. He generated millions in profits for the Gambino family. He eliminated hundreds of problems through systematic violence. And in the end, his own success made him the biggest problem that needed to be eliminated. The lesson isn't about the morality of organized crime. That's obvious. The lesson is about the inherent instability of criminal enterprises that become too successful. In the legitimate business world, exceptional success brings rewards, expansion, and increased authority. In organized crime, exceptional success eventually brings suspicion, investigation, and elimination. Roy DeMeo discovered that in the Mafia, being the best at what you do can be the most dangerous position of all. The family that profited from his methods ultimately decided that those methods were too risky to continue. The man who perfected murder was murdered by the organization he had served most effectively. That's the real story of the Butcher of Brooklyn. Not just what he did, but why his own success guaranteed his destruction. In organized crime, there's a fine line between being valuable and being expendable. Roy DeMeo crossed that line and paid the ultimate price.